November 17, 2014. I have a home group. It's the Fenwick Island Big Book meeting. It meets on Monday nights in Fenwick Island, Delaware. I live in Ocean City, and I just want to thank the committee put this event together, and Leah, my host. I've had the privilege to kind of be involved in events like this, and I know it takes a lot of work, and I think these kind of events are so important, especially they were for me when I was newly sober, just to kind of get out, socialize, and get to hear some other alcoholics. So thank you for everything, keeping me updated on everything before I got here. I really appreciate it. So, yeah, I like to talk, one of the biggest things I think is important is kind of like knowing why I was an alcoholic. And our big book defines, alcoholism as when I start drinking, I can't control the amount that I take, and when I try to stop, I can't stop entirely. And that was me from like the second I put alcohol in my system. I was introduced to alcohol at a very early age. Like Leah said, I'm originally from outside of Philadelphia, and I grew up in a big Irish Catholic family. And anyone that grew up like that knows there's a lot of alcohol. Alcohol is just a big part of everything. And I didn't actually realize until I got sober, and I didn't realize that I assumed all families and everybody kind of drank and used alcohol the way that we did. And I came to realize years later that that's not the case. But alcohol was very normalized in my family. It was always in our house. There was always a stocked liquor cabinet, beer, wine, everything. It was very normal. Any kind of event, family function, alcohol was involved. Everyone I knew, adult-wise, drank alcohol. I think my grandmother was the only person I knew that didn't drink, and I thought there was something wrong. I thought she couldn't or something. But everyone drank alcohol. And from an early age, I remember very, very young, adults, me picking up a beer can, and I remember adults telling me, wow, she likes the taste of beer. And it was like a big joke, that the normal child would pick it up and spit it out, and I would keep drinking it. And it was the running joke in my family. Now, I didn't drink, my parents did not give me alcohol at a very early age, but there are numerous photos of me 5, 6, 7, 10 drinking beer, and it was kind of, obviously they took it away, but it was definitely a joke in my family. I was introduced to regular drinking pretty early on. My family, my mom especially, she handed us alcohol at a very early age, maybe 13 or so, and she said, well, you can have a couple sips just as long as you're staying at home. She would let my friends drink, and I don't think she was, I think that's kind of the way she was brought up, so I don't look at it as anything bad or anything. It was just kind of the way our family was. And it wasn't until I kind of got a little bit older that I started breaking away and drinking on my own. And when that happened, that's when I really realized how when I first started I couldn't stop. And I can remember every single time I would pick up alcohol, I would be blacked out, drunk, do things I didn't want to do, almost every time. I can't really remember times when I would just drink a couple drinks and then go home. Maybe there would be an occasion as I got older where I had to kind of control. Our big book says that our great obsession is that we can't control and enjoy our drinking, and that was me for sure. If I was controlling it, I was not enjoying myself at all. And from a very early age, I was this, kind of binge drinker. So when I started, I could not stop. And if you do that, especially at an early age, it's gonna lead to some harsh consequences. One of my biggest memories getting in trouble when I was young, I was about 16 years old, and I entered in this contest with a friend of mine of who could finish a bottle of Southern Comfort fast enough, or first. And by the end of that night, I was being arrested. I was taken to jail. I don't even remember why we were arrested, but I wasn't driving, thank God. But when I got locked up, they gave me a breathalyzer, and I blew a .54. And they gave me the breathalyzer twice, and then they called my parents and said that, that she should be, your daughter shouldn't be alive right now. I was 16 years old. And I remember bits and pieces of that night. I remember being locked up. I remember them blowing an air horn in my, trying to kind of wake me up in the police car. And what I do remember the most about that was the next day, It was in the newspaper how we got arrested, and the next day, I was walking around. I was in high school. I was in 10th grade. So I was in high school. I was in 10th grade. I was just, nobody. And I was getting high fives through the high school, and people were high fiving me saying .54. And like seniors, like guys, like people that I wanted to impress, and I just thought, like everyone talks about I have arrived. Well, I had arrived. I definitely did. And from that point on, I loved alcohol. And what I found was, all growing up, like I was just like the average kid, shy, like kind of hung out by myself. And once I discovered alcohol, I realized like I finally found something I was good at. Like I could drink with the older kids. I could just keep up with my sister and some of the guys that I would hang out with. Like I could drink as much as they could, if not more. I mean, I had the record in my high school for like longest cake stand, and I could I could just stay up and drink, and I found I could consume a lot of alcohol and still stand. That's not really something that to be proud of at that age, but I was, and I just loved it. I loved alcohol. I loved what it did for me. It made me socialize. It made me I could talk to people. I could dance. I could do all these things, and it was pretty easily accessible for me because I grew up. My mom at an early age had kind of like left, decided to leave our family, and my dad raised me and my sisters. And he worked extremely hard. He worked at a steel mill, and he worked 12, 15, 16-hour days, which left us home alone a lot. I had an older sister who got involved in drugs and alcohol at a very early age, and kind of, took me under her wing and showed me everything, alcohol, other substances, all kinds of things. And I loved that I had an older sister and friends that could get us stuff, and and I really fell in love with it. And what happened is I continued to kind of go down this path, and it continued to lead to get myself in trouble with school, all kinds of things. But I got to a point where I was like, getting ready to go to college, and I was like, you know what? I need to straighten up. I need to do something. I need to do something with my life because I had seen my mother struggle with her life, and I didn't want to be that. I didn't want to struggle. So I knew I kind of had to get my stuff together. So I actually went through a period where I was going through college, and I was able to kind of put alcohol aside. I was able to put a lot of other substances aside. But what I always think of is when the times that I did drink, even if I would go a month without drinking or 2 weeks or whatever it was, when I drank, I was right back to when I was binge drinking in high school and whatnot. And it's kind of one of those things where when alcohol was served, I heard somebody say one time, like, we had a lot of, where I grew up, we had a lot of like bonfires and keg parties, and we drank in the woods. And I remember distinctly, like so many times where like the keg of beer was like getting like to that point where you could almost lift up the keg, and it was getting light. And I just remember that feeling like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Like, what are we going to do that keg's getting empty? And there's only probably a certain amount of people, probably everyone in here, that knows that feeling like, oh my God. And I never wanted to feel like that, so I knew at an early age, I'm like, I had to be able to, I wanted to get alcohol. And back then, this was like 18, 19 years old, I wasn't 21. It was illegal to buy alcohol. So at that age, this was like before the internet and Google and everything, and I remember calling like every state that I could actually like physically drive to, like Jersey and Delaware and Pennsylvania and Maryland, Virginia, everywhere, and trying to figure out how can I get myself a fake ID. Like I have to get a fake ID. And I figured out, like I discovered I could go to New Jersey with a birth certificate and social security card that was not mine, and basically, I figured out how to get a state-issued ID that had my picture on it saying I was 21 when I was 18. And what I think about what I went through to actually figure that out and do that, later on, a lot of my friends kind of followed in that, and the state of New Jersey changed their policy on how they issue these IDs because of the amount of people I sent that way to get these IDs. And it was just crazy, but I was determined. I was determined to always have alcohol, because my dad didn't just feed us alcohol. Like, he would let us maybe have a beer or two, but he did not buy us alcohol. He did not condone it. Maybe on occasion if it was a party or whatever. But as life went on, drinking progressed rapidly, and kind of when I finished college, I held it together enough to go that route, and I ended up in Ocean City, Maryland for a summer. It was like my lifelong dream to lifeguard on the beach. And I ended up in Ocean City, Maryland, and I lifeguarded that summer, and I went back to college in Philadelphia. And then I did it a second summer, and then when I discovered Ocean City, I was like, oh my God, I have to live here. Like, I thought it was the best place in the world because there was a bar on every corner. It seemed like everyone did was drink. I had the fake ID, you know, I loved it, and I was like, I have to live here. So I literally transferred from Temple University to Salisbury and did all this things crazy just so I could live in Ocean City, so I could drink all the time, and I felt like it was more accessible or just accepted more, and that's how I've been there ever since. But yeah, it was like, for an alcoholic, best place in the world. But I come to find out too, for being sober, it's actually a great place to live as well. But I eventually, got myself a job where I did a lot of traveling. I was up and about. I was traveling all over. I worked for a directing company, and we go, all over, up and down the East Coast, doing projects. And I was spending a lot of time alone, a lot of time in hotel rooms, living, different places here and there. And that's when my drinking really kind of progressed. And I found myself drinking alone, drinking before I went out, drinking, it just really started rapidly increasing. And then, one day I was on a lunch break from work, and because at this point I was working every day, working really hard, and then going home and drinking. I worked really hard. I deserve alcohol. And one day, all of a sudden, I found myself it was a lunch break, and I found myself going home and pouring a glass of wine because I had a really hard morning. And and that started. I remember distinctly the day that happened. So I remember thinking, this probably isn't normal. And from there, it just kept continuing to progress. And throughout a couple of years, I racked up several DUIs. When I got hired with my company, I had a clean driving record. The only thing I had was that public drunkenness when I was 16. But other than that, my driving record was clean. After I got hired, I had gotten 3 DUIs, and they had never, I never told my work, obviously, about this. I was driving company vehicles. I was actually operating boats, all kinds of things, and I always managed to keep a license, sort of. I pretty much lived for 3 to 4 years with a breathalyzer in my car, but the breathalyzer was in my car and not in a company car, so I basically was driving without a license for a very long time. And my drinking just definitely started to progress, and I found myself first drinking on lunch breaks, and then all of a sudden I was drinking, I would go at lunch and then drink the rest of the day, and all of a sudden I'm taking vodka in water bottles, almost everywhere I go. I would try to kind of I would be able to stop for a couple days, and I would know what I was doing was wrong, and I shouldn't be. But I would stop for 2 or 3 days, and I would cycle right back to the drinking. And what would happen was, once I would start, I literally couldn't stop, and it got to the point where I was physically addicted to the alcohol, where if I didn't have it, I would start to shake. I would hallucinate. I was starting to see things. My body would just kind of almost start to shut down, and I knew what was going on. I would research. I would Google delirium tremens and what happens to alcoholics, and I just thought that I knew what was going on with my body, but I just thought if I could stop drinking long enough, that when I started again, the shakes and the withdrawal wouldn't be as bad. So I just had to control it. And I went through the gates of insanity and death trying to control this alcoholism and this drinking, and I never won. I absolutely never won. And it just got worse and worse and worse. And towards the end of my drinking, I was living in hotel rooms, and I literally had vodka on me at all times. I kept it under the bathroom sink at my work. It was in my purse. I slept with it. I used to, not really joke, but it's 100% the truth. I slept with a vodka bottle under my pillow because I wouldn't even lift my body up to start drinking from it. I would just roll over, chug from the bottle, and put it back. And I was terrified that somebody was going to come in and see the vodka. And I lived alone, and I was in hotel rooms alone. I didn't have really anybody close to me in my family. I was terrified. I was never in a relationship with anyone because I was terrified that someone would get too close to me, and then they would know, they would see the way I really lived. And I knew I didn't want anyone to see my family. I hid it from everybody. And but I still had this terror that someone was going to come in and steal my alcohol or steal my vodka. And and I had it hidden everywhere. It was all over. It was all over my work, my house, everywhere. And what happened was I eventually eventually it all caught up with me, and I was like driving the company vehicle in Atlantic City, and it was 8 o'clock in the morning, and I hit a car, and I got pulled over. I didn't even get pulled over. The cop, I ran from the scene. I didn't have a license at the time. I was in a blackout basically, and all of a sudden I'm in a hotel room by myself, and the cops are knocking on my door, and you know, I didn't even know what was happening, and it was crazy. I immediately lost my job, and like when everyone kept asking me, they were like, I don't understand how you were so drunk at 8 o'clock in the morning. And it was because like my drinking never stopped. My drinking was around the clock, 24 hours a day. It didn't even stop when I was sleeping. I might pass out for like an hour. I swear I didn't sleep for the last 3 years I was drinking because I never could stop drinking long enough to actually go into a deep sleep. And I lost my job, and I thought my world had ended. And it's crazy because I lied to my family, and I told them I still had my job, and I just sat at home. They thought I was away at work, and I just sat at home and drank because I had some like money put away, and I was able to continue living my life. But eventually, you know, everything kind of came out, and it's crazy because my work found out about that was the 4th DUI. And they were like, oh my God, and they ran my driving record, and they saw that I had accumulated 3 DUIs in 6 years I was working for them. And so they now have an entire new HR policy with driving records. And because they normally would just check you when you got fired, but now they check people every year because of me. So, you know, at that point, I was like, well, I didn't think, I just thought I had to, like I said, control my drinking, and I went through several jobs after that. I'm living in Ocean City. I started waiting tables, and I eventually got myself a job, kind of doing the work that I was doing, but for another smaller company, and I went from the position I had to kind of like the lowest level position, but I was willing to do anything. And when the guy was interviewing me, he knew my story, he knew I got fired, and he said, I don't really care what you do after work, I don't care what you do on the weekends, but when you're working, he's like, you can't drink alcohol while you're working. And I'm like, oh, of course. Like it was a one-time mistake that I got fired, you know, all this stuff. And he's like, just don't drink it while you're working. And if you would have hooked me up to a lie detector test, I would have sworn to you that I was not going to drink while I was working. I was going to maybe go 8 hours without it, and that lasted for about 30 days. And then the next thing I know, I'm back to square one, drinking all day and every day. And eventually, you know, lost that job and several other jobs. And it eventually got to the point where my sister begged me and pleaded with me to go into a rehab. And I didn't want to go to a rehab. I didn't want to stop drinking. I just wanted the pain to go away, and I wanted to stop hurting my family. At that point, my sister just had a baby, both of my sisters, and I was babysitting. And I remember not even being able to like feed my niece. I was trying to feed her baby food, and my hand was shaking so bad because I had tried to stop drinking, knowing I was going to go see children, and I was shaking so bad that I couldn't get the food into her mouth. Literally, and then it was at that point I kind of broke down, and I went to a rehab, and I got detox, and I felt a lot better. And I remember being at the rehab, and you know, anyone that's been to rehab knows probably 80% of the people there are there for drugs, and alcoholics are kind of like the smaller minority. And I remember these girls and guys saying that they've been there 6 times, 5 times, 12 times, 10, you know, whatever. And I just remember thinking like, oh my God, like why would you ever want to come back here? Like, you know, it's not like the best living situation, you know. I was very thankful for it, but I did not want to go back. And I just remember thinking almost like I was like better than them because I was an alcoholic and they were drug addicts, you know, things like that. And I had grown up with a sister that older sister that introduced me to everything. She had gotten addicted to drugs at her early age and was still, I grew up with that. So growing up, I never thought like I was like the good one. I never thought, you know, her problems were a lot worse than mine because she was addicted to the hard drugs and she was stealing and robbing from my family and homeless and all the things that like I wasn't, you know. And then I remember seeing so many girls like my sister in that rehab and still thinking that like, I got this. Like, thanks for the information, and they told me to, you know, go to all these meetings when I got out and do all these things. And I was like, well, I have to get a job, you know, like, I'm not gonna have time for these meetings, like, I understand, I can't drink. And I really just thought that I couldn't drink right now in my life. I did not think that I couldn't drink the rest of my life. I just didn't. I thought I needed to slow down and then again learn how to control the drinking. And what happened was I ended up back in that rehab like 4 months later because I didn't I went to a couple meetings, I didn't get a sponsor, I didn't do anything that was asked of me because I had to get a job, and I had to do this, and I had to get my life back together. And so when I relapsed that second time, I couldn't believe it. It was just like the story of the big book, where like suddenly the thought crossed my mind. A guy came to my house and was like, oh, we're gonna have some fish for dinner, and he's like, I brought some white wine, I know you don't drink, but I'm gonna drink it. And I'm like, white wine, fish? Oh, I have to have a glass. Of course. And it was just like, I didn't even think. I had no time to like call somebody or do all these things. Like the thought came over and I drank that glass of wine. And this was a normal drinker, and within like an hour, I don't even think the meal was finished, I was at the liquor store. And I didn't even have a car. I rode my bike. And I was buying vodka, and like I drank nonstop for like 9 days. I went to this like black hole, and it was terrible. And the withdrawals and the shakes and all those things were 10 times worse. They were so much worse after being sober for that long. And I ended up back in that rehab, and this time I was willing to listen, and I looked at everyone there. Definitely, I was looking at everyone differently because I understood how they ended up back there, and I knew that I was going to end up back there again if I didn't change and do something different. And so that time around, I got out. I knew I had to get a sponsor. I went to a meeting like immediately, and I went to a lot of meetings in the beginning, a lot. I was going to meetings, I was in intensive outpatient, and I didn't have a job, so I had plenty of time. And I just remember everybody saying, like, do the steps, get a sponsor, do the steps, get a sponsor. And it took me, it's funny because there was a gentleman that was approaching me almost every single day at our clubhouse where I would go and asking me if I had a sponsor. Get a sponsor. Very nice and kind. And every day I would say, no, I'm going to get one. He's like, well, promise me you'll get one by 60 days sober. And sure enough, day 59, I was like, I have to get a sponsor. I promised this guy, I would get a sponsor. And I finally had enough courage to do that and ask this woman, to be my sponsor. And it's crazy because that gentleman is actually going to be speaking tonight today at 2 o'clock. And I didn't even know he was going to be here. I just remember that so vividly because I don't know if I would have got a sponsor. Like it seems so silly, like and trivial, like oh you have to get one. But I was just like oh I have to like I thought this guy was Mr. AA and did everything right, and I thought the world of him, and I didn't want to disappoint him. So and because once you get the sponsor, it's like then you're okay. And I can't believe I went so long. I went 60 days without, but I think the meetings kind of kept me sober, lots and lots of meetings, and right away I was so happy that my sponsor said yes, because the day I was going to ask her, I found out she had 5 other sponsees, and I'm like, there's no way she's going to say yes. Like I'd be number 6, and she said like, of course I'll help you, and and I did everything she asked me to do. She asked me to call 5 women every day, go to a meeting every day, text her in the morning and in the evening, all these things, and I did everything. I absolutely did everything because I was like just so desperate. I did not want to go back to that place where I was with alcohol, and I think the relapse really helped me kind of like fully conceive that I was an alcoholic. And we went through the steps. I did my assignments. I did everything that was asked, and I really just kind of jumped in the middle of AA. And it was extremely eye-opening to kind of see this program, to kind of realize the kind of person and the life that I was living and how crazy it was. But you kind of just take one step and do the next right thing. I remember her telling me, right now you're sick. She kept stressing that I had a disease. I had a disease, and my medicine was to go to meetings, do the steps, and help other people. And I'm like, well, how can I help somebody? Like, what am I going to offer? And she was like, just find ways to help others. I would try to give people rides to meetings, or anyone needed, just do things to help. And it kind of kept me busy. And I did what was asked with the step work. And there was a lot of, she sponsored a lot of people, so I had this, I developed this, right away, this group of women that I became close with. We would call each other every day, and there was another woman who she just started sponsoring, and I developed some friends and relationships in AA. And about a year went by, and my sponsor had taken me through the steps, but she called it the easier, softer way. And we didn't use the big book at all. She had kind of her own way. We went through the steps, but not as they're outlined in the big book. There wasn't any amends done. And I started really realizing, wait a minute, what's this book, and why is everyone talking about making these amends and this fourth step? We did do steps, but it was just a different kind of version, and I'm really extremely grateful of what she had given me. But I realized at that point, like, I really wanted to go through the big book because that's what I kept hearing people talk about. So I had to, I decided to get another sponsor, and I found a woman who took me through the big book line by line, page by page. We sat and read the first 164 pages and went through the steps, and oh my God, I was like, wow. It was definitely one of those experiences where the steps just change your life. And probably the biggest thing I can remember is, when I first got sober, going through step one, my sponsor explained about the allergy, the doctor's opinion, and what happens when we take alcohol in our system. And I couldn't really grasp this whole allergy thing. I mean, I understood it and I have proof it happened to me, but I just wanted more information. I was like, what allergy? What does that even mean? Like, what do doctors say about this? And so my sponsor referred me to a Joe and Charlie talk that kind of dig into this deeper. And the way that I heard it explained to me was that once we ingest alcohol, it's different. We break alcohol down differently than the non-alcoholic. Because when it gets to a certain stage and we're metabolizing the alcohol, we don't possess the same enzymes in the quality and quantity that non-alcoholics. So what happens is we get to this, we break the alcohol down and it gets to this stage where it's broken down into acetate. And the acetate kind of remains in the alcoholic system longer, which causes the craving. Right? The non-alcoholic breaks it down and, they just have their one drink an hour and they go about their lives and everything's fine. But this acetate kind of remains in our system because our bodies can't break it down, which causes some of the craving. So if, kind of reading up on this, after you have one drink, this acetate remains in your system and it causes a little bit of a craving. But then after you have the second drink, you have it from the first and from the second, and the craving increases. And then the third drink, and so on. So the more we drink, the more that we crave. And when I kind of heard this, I was just like, oh my God, I never went out and had a drink. My first drink was always somewhat normal for the most part. I never started off chugging a beer or doing a keg stand or doing a double shot. I usually started off with one glass of a beer or one glass of wine or something. But it was always the more I drank, the more that I craved. It would be 2 o'clock in the morning and I'm at a bar and I'm ordering a double shot, 2 beers for the 15 minutes that I have till they kick us out. Or it's 1:30 and I'm going to the liquor store and I'm buying a handle of vodka to go home with for what? By myself. But I was constantly, I just could feel the connection of how I was accepting that I was an alcoholic. It was at that point, and then I started reading up on it. I was reading all these research articles, and there's a correlation between this acetate and our blood alcohol level. And I've had 5 breathalyzers in my whole life, blowing or arrested or whatever. And 3 that I remember, I blew a .54 when I was 16, and then a .42 in a rehab, and a .38 at another arrest. And those are really high numbers. And I was reading this article about the way we break down alcohol, it causes, when we can't break it down, it causes these high blood alcohol levels. And it all kind of made sense to me. And it was at that point that I fully conceded, I'm an alcoholic. Oh my God, what am I going to do? And it was really important for me to kind of understand that and for me to admit that I am this way for the rest of my life and I have to accept it. But my sponsor also had to remind me yes, you understand it, you have this self-knowledge, but the real problem centers in our minds, right? The real problem is I have a mind that one day is going to tell me that I can drink. And that's where I have to do the work. I have to have a connection with a higher power and go through these steps. Because just because I know in my heart that I'm an alcoholic, it doesn't mean that my disease isn't going to tell me later on that it's safe to take a drink. And I experience that. And I see that every day. I see that with people struggling, and it's really sad to watch. So I knew that I had to do the work. And for me, it was a good sponsorship is so important. For anyone new, I think, having a sponsor who kind of walk you hand by hand through these steps for me was crucial. And straight out of the big book. Some of the things, learning that a relationship with God. I remember sitting down with my sponsor saying, I'll do all this work, but I'm not good with the God thing. I'm just not, I'm not interested in a God, all these different things. And she was like, listen, how about we just go through the work? She's like, my job is not to prove to you that there's a God. She's like, my job is to take you through the steps, and God will take care of the rest. And thank God that in step 2, it says we just have to be willing to believe. It doesn't say that we have to believe, it just says we have to be willing. And I was willing. I was willing because of everyone in the rooms. I was willing because of the stories that I heard, the sponsor that I had, the miracles that I saw. I was willing to believe, and I was willing to go on through the rest of the steps. And going through my 4th and my 5th step was a very difficult experience. I just remember thinking, like, I can't believe what a horrible person I am. Not necessarily, because I also started to realize that it wasn't alcohol. Like, I didn't do all these things just because I drank. I did all these things because I'm an alcoholic, and I'm selfish and self-centered to the core, without a doubt. And I can be that way with or without drinking. You know, but it was all that stuff was just extremely eye-opening, and realizing, like, wow, I really have to change everything about my life, like, completely, everything. I'm going to turn my life over to a higher power. But I remember thinking, like, well, I have to control my life. Like, how else is my life going to succeed? And I remember my sponsor saying, like, well, let's look at the record of your life. Like, let's go back to this step 1 inventory that you did, and, like, let's look at that, and let's look at how things are going now. So, like, I had no room. I had no argument, because my life was a disaster. It was an absolute disaster. You know, I barely had any friends. My family all wanted nothing to do with me. You know, I was about to lose my house, like, you know, everything. And I'm like, okay, well, how about you try something new? Okay, well, I can do that, you know. And I kind of just continued to go through the work. And I remember, like, finishing my steps and having this, and her asking me about my connection with God. And I was like, I don't know what happened, but somewhere along the line, like, I was like, I didn't want to admit to her that I felt this connection with God. And because I wanted to be right. I wanted to be right, that I don't need the God connection, and you're never going to give it to me. And, you know, she was exactly right when she said, all I have to do is take you through the steps, and God will take care of the rest. Because I got to the end, and I was like, wow, you know, I had this connection with God, and it was almost like I wanted to hold on to it, and I didn't want to let it go. And I think about that connection that I had then and what I have now, and it's unbelievably different. You know, it was like I was just touching the surface. You know, just touching the surface of God. And, you know, if you keep doing this program and keep doing the next right thing, is what people kept telling me, you know, life starts to get better. When I put alcohol down, life started to get better. Now, I came from a place where it was really bad. So it was like little things, you know, little things were happening that were huge for me. But about, I don't know, 2 years sober, I was making all my amends. I was doing everything I was supposed to, direct amends with people. I made with that second sponsor, and a big amends was with the company that I worked for years. That I lied and I cheated and I manipulated people and I did all these things, and you know, I stole things, and I had to make things right, and I went ahead and I did that, and I almost had to just make an amends to the company itself, because there was just so many people that I had directly hurt. It was almost impossible to kind of reach out to them one by one. But I did that, and it turned out that one of my supervisors there, actually, I didn't remember right away, but he had approached me at some point and asked me what was wrong. And I just remember going back to him and saying, oh, I'm stressed out, I'm on medication, I have a sister that's a drug addict, and I'm trying to deal with this. He was trying to help me. And 2 years go by, and all of a sudden the company's like reaching out to me, and they're asking me if I consider sitting in for an interview. They're like, we heard you got sober, and I couldn't believe it, because they have this policy where they can't drive. If you have a DUI, you have to have 5 years of a clean driving record, and my record was only clean for maybe 2 years, and my record was awful. I had just gotten a license back, and you know, long story short, they ended up giving me an interview, and they asked for proof that I was sober. And I was like, what do I do? You know, and I remember like taking a photo of all of my 1 month coins that I collected, and I like put them on a paper and said 1 month and 2 months. And then I had some people in AA write me some reference letters, my sponsor, somebody else, and you know, they said, well, risk management needs some kind of proof. You know, so I did all these things, and then they gave me a job, but I wasn't allowed to drive a company vehicle. They were like, you drive your own, and I was okay with that. You know, and I was able to, and I remember thinking, like, I can't go back to this job. Like, how could I ever do this job drinking? Like, no, how is it going to be impossible? And then, you know, our book says that we can go anywhere in the world, we can do anything as long as we're in fit spiritual condition. And that's what my sponsor reminded me of. So she made sure that I was doing the steps and going to meetings and doing all this stuff while I was staying connected at work. And that's what I did. And, you know, about a year went by and I was working, and I get a call that they're sending a girl to my project. And they were like, here's her resume, she's going to start off with you guys. And there's not a lot of females that work in our business. So I was excited that she was coming, and they put us in we were going to live in a house together. And right away, I like couldn't. This girl was like amazing, like as far as work. You know, she had a great resume. She was extremely smart. Picked up on stuff right away. And one day we're sitting at work, and we're all kind of struggling over this problem. And she's like, "Well, progress, not perfection." And I'm like, I was like thinking, I'm like, do normal people say that? Like I didn't know, you know. And I'm like, okay. And then she said something like later on about meditating on her way to work. And I was like, She was young, straight out of college. I mean, I assume she was young because she was straight out of college. You know, this was her first real job. And she was a mechanical engineer. And I just kind of little things that was like maybe, and I'm like, you know what, maybe she grew up with like alcoholic parents and she went to like sat in on meetings when she was young. Was the only explanation I could think of. And we were in this little small town in North Carolina, and there was one meeting 7 days a week. So a couple times a week, I'll go into this meeting, and there's the same 10 people, and I told them I'm here for work, you know, whatever. And what was going on was this girl that I was working with was actually one of us. And she was going to that same meeting a couple days a week when I wasn't there. And everybody in that meeting knew who we were. They knew we were living in the same house. And I remember, like, one day it hit me. I was like, oh, I'm going out real quick. And she's like, oh, where are you going? And I'm like, the grocery store. And I remember calling my sponsor. I'm like, I just lied. Like, I lied. And at that point, I wasn't really comfortable. People at my work, they knew I didn't drink. You know, most people knew because they knew me from before. And but I didn't say, oh, I'm an AA. You know, I'm an alcoholic. You know, people asked, I told them. And what happened was one day, I was in the meeting and she walks in, and the whole room just starts clapping, and they're like, finally! And I just couldn't, I was like, no, like it was like weird, like deep down I kind of thought that, but I just didn't think somebody as smart as her, as intelligent, as like her background, like no way can she be one of us, right? Because I'm judging. And it was just, it became this, and right away I say, well, did they transfer you here to this job because of me, right? The HR department knows I'm an alcoholic. And she's like, well, Colleen, I didn't put it on my resume. So she was not, you know, we have maybe 12 to 15 projects going on in my company at one time. And she gets hired and she ends up on the project with me. And, you know, how does that happen? How does that happen? And so then it becomes this beautiful thing. We're living together, we're going to meetings, you know, we work different schedules, but like we're connecting and sharing stories. And all of a sudden I'm like, I'm going to make it. Like, you know, this is great. And, you know, we end up getting separated at work and reunited on another project. And, you know, I wish I could say this story, like, you know, had a wonderful happy ending, but I was actually at home and on some off time, I get a call from a coworker that knows I'm an alcoholic, knows my story, and she says, you know, so-and-so is acting kind of funny. I just thought, like, I don't know, I'm not really sure what to do about it. She hasn't showed up for a couple days, and the last time she showed up, she just wasn't acting herself. And I said, oh, what happened before she didn't show up? And she tells me, she's like, well, a couple of us went out for some Mexican food, and we were all sitting around, and I was like, oh, I said, do you guys have like some margaritas? You know, I'm trying to like kind of figure out what happened. And she's like, well, actually, yeah. She's like, we all did, but I'll just call her Jennifer. Jennifer didn't want one, so because nobody knew that she didn't drink. She was very, very secretive, and she wasn't openly. Like if somebody offers me a drink at work, no, I don't drink. I'm allergic, you know, whatever. I don't drink alcohol. And she was not comfortable with that. So what happened was some of the girls were like, oh, well, try this margarita, it's strawberry or whatever. And she denied it almost 2 or 3 times, and finally she just took a sip. She took a sip to kind of appease her coworkers, and the next thing you know, she was like, well, actually, we all had like 1 or 2, and I think she had like 4. And I'm thinking, oh my God, and then she hadn't shown up for 3 or 4 days. So I immediately, she's in Atlantic City and I'm in Ocean City, Maryland, and I got in my car and I'm driving, I immediately got in the car and started driving, and I'm on the ferry, taking the ferry over there, and I'm calling my sponsor, what do I do? Because at this point I'm her supervisor, I'm an AA, she's an alcoholic, and she's like, Colleen, there's a whole chapter written about this in the big book, and we've studied this numerous times, and she's right, there's the chapter to the employers, because, and you know what, oh my God, thank God for that chapter, because what that chapter, and I knew this, I was just kind of flustered, the chapter says if there's an alcoholic working for your company, and they want to get help, we get them help. The chapter clearly states that, because if they get help, they can do the job with 5 people. They can be the best employee that you have. And I kind of proved that when I went back to work for my company. They were like, wow, you're doing a great job. And I'm like, I'm not drinking 24/7. This job is a lot easier. And if they don't want to get help, then we let them go, because we know what's going to happen to them. If she's not willing to get help. So I show up on her doorstep and I knock on the door and I said, are you willing to get help?
Do you want to stop drinking? And she says, I do, but I can't. I can't stop. And I said, okay, we're gonna get you help. And call, thank God, phone call after phone call, AA person, connection here and there. I ended up at 11 o'clock that night. I had her in a rehab in upstate New York, and I dropped her off, and by the time I got back the next morning, I had to make a phone call to my work. So-and-so won't be coming in for 30 days, she'll be in rehab. And I talked to her and got permission and everything, and it was just my work, and the people that I work with, they were like, wait a minute, you mean she's an alcoholic? They could not believe that this girl was an alcoholic, because not what you would think, not, doesn't look, just, they were in shock. And then they were like, well, why are you here? You're off for 2 weeks. Why are you here? And how did, they were like, what is going on? And I was like, well, I'm also a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and blah, blah, blah. And, I was kind of acting as another AA member that night, not necessarily as her employer. And, and she ended up in a rehab and got better and was able to come back to work. And if it wasn't for AA and this program, I don't know, she would have ended up like me. She would have ended up fired without a doubt, and without a job and everything. But I was able to kind of be of service to my work, and to her as well. And and like I said, I wish I could say that the story ended there, but she stayed sober for a while and then fell off again. And I haven't spoken to her in a while, but I can just only pray and hope that she finds us again. But it's things like that in this program that allows us to see these miracle works of God. At that time, I was very scared going back to work and how am I going to live and survive. And in the end, it was a lesson. It was a lesson for me that I can't let up on my program, because once she got away from me, I was kind of like her crutch. And once she got away from me and got on her own, she wasn't doing the things that we're supposed to do. From what I got from our sponsor, wasn't going to meetings and doing all this stuff. And I learned I have to stay connected to this program no matter what. No matter where I am in the world, I have to stay connected to the program, the steps, my sponsor. And, over the years, I got another sponsor. Thank God. I feel I'm so grateful for every sponsor that I've had, just for a new experience. My sponsor now lives in North Dakota, which is kind of crazy, but somehow God brought us together. And we were meeting over Zoom before Zoom was a thing. We just meet face to face over the phone. And the way that I travel with my work, it just worked out really well, because I'm never in one spot. And that's the way I meet with my sponsees now. And oh my God, did she kind of open my eyes and give me a whole new experience with this program, which I felt I had with every sponsor. But what she really did is gave me this guidelines, outline. Our book says that the program gives us an outline for life, and that's what these 12 steps are. I thought I was coming to AA to stop drinking, right? To stop drinking. That's all I wanted to do. But little did I know, by living these steps and working them every day, I not only get to stop drinking and not wake up every day chugging vodka, but I have a design for living that works with like the everyday struggles of life. Because drunk or sober, I'm going to experience fear and resentment and, the need to be right? My sponsor tells me my need to be right is going to kill me. Because do I want to be right or do I want to be happy? I want both. I absolutely want both. And I've learned, I have to let go of this ability to want to control other people. What I've learned in step 4 and 5 is that I want everyone to do as I want them to do. And when they don't, I get really disturbed. But because of this program and practicing these principles and letting acceptance of kind of like who they are, I can let go of that, and I can see people for where they're at and why they're doing things, and I can move on with my life. I don't have to live in these resentment, fear, and worry and frustration. I have a sponsor and a whole toolbox full of tools and inventories and prayer and God and other AA women. And it's saved my life, and I'm so grateful. I remember when I came to AA, like I said, I come from a big family of drinkers, and I just remember thinking, why? Why me? Every single person in my family could be sitting here. They 100% probably qualify, but why am I the alcoholic? And it was, I was 34 when I got sober, and I'm thinking, my rest of my life is ruined. But what I realize now is, I'm the lucky one. I'm extremely blessed and lucky. And, everyone else, I watch them struggle. I watch, this is a family disease, and, my family suffers a lot because there's a lot of alcoholics, untreated alcoholism, and the people that aren't one of us, it's hard to watch. It's extremely hard to watch. And I'm just so grateful that I have this program to teach me how to, kind of go on with my life. And even at work, that job, I've done a lot for my work. I've moved up into different positions, but there's unbelievable how much stuff I've learned in AA that has helped me in my career. It's even getting up here. I don't speak very often at these things, but we all sit up front and speak at a meeting or share or do these things that AA taught us. And all of a sudden, I'm having to do a presentation at work, and everyone's like, oh my God, I don't want to do it. And I'm like, well, of course I don't want to, but I'm a little bit comfortable because I've spoken at AA meetings. We recently just had this kind of training and development, it's leadership training that we're going through, that our company kind of threw at us, and every month is a different topic on how to be better leaders. So all of our supervisors meet and we discuss these topics. And so far, every single topic is an AA spiritual principle that I've studied with my sponsor, like honesty and trustworthy and character and humility. And we just did integrity last week. And as I'm reading this stuff, I'm sharing and giving my thoughts and experience. And I'm like, oh my God, I feel like I'm in an AA meeting. And I'm thinking, wow, I think it's so great that we're giving people. At my work, there's people, we're giving them these tools and trying to how to teach them to become better leaders. And I'm that's what AA has taught me, is how to be a better person. Just all around. I think of my grandmother often, because my grandmother was one of those people that did the right thing no matter what. She did the right thing all the time. And I don't know, I didn't grow up with that. My family was all, my mom was a lot of, she would beg us to lie for her and, to steal, different things like that. I grew up in not following spiritual principles at all. Those things were not taught to me. And even, I thought I had to, get ahead in life. And to get ahead, I had to, I might need to step on you or talk bad about you or do whatever I had to do to get myself ahead in life. And if you didn't have anything that I wanted, you were no use to me. And I remember making a list when I was 16 years old of all my friends and what they brought to me. And one was drug dealer. Okay, he's gonna be in my life for a while. And then it was this person had a car, I would get rides from him, or this person had a boat, keep him on the list. And literally thinking that's who I had to stay close to. And my life is completely different now. I don't live in this transactional world where I'm looking to get something if I'm going to give something to you. And that was a huge lesson for me, even with relationships and family. I used to think, if you're not going to treat me right, I'm going to do the same to you. And I was taught through this program that like I can give love and compassion and patience and tolerance regardless. You know, I can be that kind of person just because that's who I am. And it's been, you know, I have a sister who's not one of us, and she just, all the time, she's like, I don't understand how you can just forgive mom for all these things, or you can be so loving and for everything she's done to you. And I try to just pass it on, like, you know, this is the person I want to be. And it doesn't matter how you respond, I'm still going to be this person. And it's only because of these 12 steps and this program that I live that way. And it's practice. It's like a lot of hard work. One of the biggest things I found is working with other people. You know, I've heard like you have to give this program away to keep it. And like I really think you have to give this program away to get it, right? Because I was taken through this book with a sponsor, word by word, line by line, and then I did the same with several women. And it was like every step I would get to with a new sponsee, I'm like, oh my God, like I can't believe I didn't realize that the first time. And you would go deeper and deeper into the step. And as I was approaching a step with a sponsee, I would go listen to a talk on the step, or I would try to study it, or I would try to like, you know, ask people's experience. And it just, you know, sponsoring other women, working with other women has changed my life. And it's also been like my life, I feel like it's my lifeline. My sponsees are like my lifeline to AA, because I can't just walk away, right? I can't just like, I have scheduled appointments and meetings, and I have a sponsor who has scheduled things, and if I don't show up in my home group, they're asking, where are you? You know, is everything okay? And if I'm not talking to the sponsees, they're asking me. And then service, like I was told to get a service position, and I try to stay connected with service, and that keeps me connected. If you're new in this program, like I feel service not only is so incredibly important, but it keeps you connected. Because I didn't know like anyone in my home group, barely, you know, I was just a girl that sat in the corner in the very beginning, and then all of a sudden like I got a coffee commitment, and all of a sudden like everyone's talking to me, and I'm like getting there early and staying late, and I'm cleaning up, and all of a sudden you're like a part of. And that's the only way for me is to be a part of. And it's like events like this, I help out with workshops, I did for years in Ocean City, and you meet so many people and get involved, and that's why like when AA asked me to do something, I have to say yes, because I was trained. Like my reaction when a good friend of mine was supposed to speak tonight, or today, and my first reaction would be like, absolutely no, I can't, they don't want to hear what I have to say, I'm not good enough, whatever. But no way could I call my sponsor and say my calendar was free, but I said no. You know, because of fear, and so like I just feel like this program kind of like trains us and puts us in the right spot, gives us the tools that we need to get through life, and I'm forever grateful for everything that was given to me, and I feel like I have to give back. When we were talking before the event, she had told me that she had been sober for 30 years, and she's still involved in these programs and like hosting a speaker, and I was just like so impressed and amazed, because that's what I want to do. I have a sponsee here tonight, Monica. And she's been sober for so long, and I learned from her, because her commitment to service is like unbelievable. And I admire so much people that have been sober for that long, and that's what I want to be, you know, because I never want to walk away or think that I don't have time. Because what happens when you get sober is life gets better. You know, since I've been sober, my job has been going well, you know, my family wants to be around, I have AA functions and events. All of a sudden, life gets pretty busy. Like, I'm going on a vacation and I'm doing this. AA has allowed me to do all this stuff. And my sponsor reminds me all the time, it is not your life, it is not your house, it is not your car, it all belongs to God. Temporary gifts, you know, you have to remember that. And all of a sudden my life can get too busy that I don't have time for AA. And I have to remember that I always have to have time for Alcoholics Anonymous and for this program. And it's kind of like, I look at the proof. It goes back to when I was doing step one. Like, let's look at the record of where my life is now compared to, you know, where it was when I came in. If I would have like written down a list of like wants, whether it be material or relationships or just anything, I would have sold myself completely short, because my life now is so full. I have a relationship with my mother, the mother that, like, I have a sister who has no relationship with her because of the things that she the way we were treated when we were young, and I do have a relationship because I can look past that stuff and I can love her and care for her and forgive, and I watch the suffering of the people in my family that can't, and I just feel for them, and I wish I could give this program to everybody. I think everyone needs a 12-step program. The world would be a better place. But I also can't control other people, or their thoughts or their actions. And, you know, I'm grateful to be here. I wanted to read something. One of my favorite lines, and it's in the 12 and 12, not in the big book, but I just think it's so important. It says, AA's 12 steps are a group of principles spiritual in nature, which, if practiced as a way of life, can expel the obsession to drink and enable the sufferer to become happily and usefully whole. And I think it's so important because not only is my obsession to drink lifted, but I can live happily and usefully whole. And that's amazing. Like, I absolutely love AA. I love this program. I love all the relationships and friendships that I've developed, and I don't know what I would do without it. So that's all I have, and thanks for letting me share.